Sarah, how are you? Nice to see you again.
Oh, it's so good to catch up.
Sarah, I'm going to dive right into it. You're a very busy person and you now have this like fabulous new, highly demanding role in a new company. Congratulations on that.
Thanks so much for having fun.
So I just wanted to pick your brain. You're the absolute most amazing speaker I've heard. When it comes to like intent and ABM, it's totally your thing. So I wanted to pick your brain about a few things around that subject. And I'm sure like there are so many people who struggle with B2B intent driven marketing. So I wanted to talk to you about just stuff that you feel works really well, stuff that you would tell people to try, and then stuff that you would absolutely never try again.
hmm Well, first of all, it's so funny that you say that, and a few folks have told me since seeing me speak that they see me as like really hardcore in ABM and intent when I started out as a really strong ABM skeptic.
Oh,
Um,
really?
when I first started, doing account-based marketing back in like 2016, 2017, it was pre-pandemic. Like account-based marketing meant you had maybe 50 accounts in North America, and that was all you were focused on. And you were focused on doing a roadshow to all of them, or sending gifts to their office, or calling their office, things that just don't work when now we are in a remote work culture by and large.
Right.
And so it's really been a shift since I first started doing ABM stuff into intent models and digital ABM. And frankly, I see a little bit of I don't know, it's like the chicken or the egg problem. Do you start with intent data and use that to choose your target accounts, or do you choose your target accounts and then layer intent data on top of that? I've run campaigns both ways, but my like talk track on ABM is a lot of what ABM is not, because it is such a muddled space. And now we have ABX as a term. It's just been co-opted by vendors, and we're both in the cybersecurity space. We know what that's like when an acronym goes
Yep.
wide.
It's jargon heaven. People
Yes.
love stuff.
Tech is the same and ABM is the worst offender. So I preface everything I say with that. If anything I say about ABM or intent comes from a former and maybe current ABM skeptic.
Okay. Absolutely heard the disclaimers.
So that's it. Yeah. Where do you want to jump in? Just general things that work, or?
That works specifically for like B2B stuff. I know that people struggle with that in terms of I feel like one of the big issues that people have is that they always believe when they're going after an account is that this is a huge whale that I have to snag. And they're not really like thinking person to person, because it is still a person who's a buyer on the other end of the table, right? Sure, I mean, their interests might be more driven by the business goals or whatever you achieve with that vendor. But I think like people forget that it is a person. And one of the things that we learned at Cyber Marketing Con was also that even in the biggest deals, it's always a team of 2 to 5 people at the most who are buying. So what have you found that works? And just stuff that doesn't work, even that's just as important, I think.
Yeah. So I always like to say it's important to start with the strategy first and the tech comes after that. So I love to talk about Sixth Sense, demand based, the tech, what it does, what it doesn't do, but let's leave that off for later. What works strategically is being very focused on what it means to have account-based plans. So it starts with not only selecting the right accounts, which gets easier the more mature your business is, right? I'm at a Series A startup right now, Endor Labs, only been selling for about a year. So we have an idea of what our ICP is, but a business that's been around for 10 years and has loads of historical data to then know exactly who their ideal customers are, it's going to have an easier time, right? But it's first selecting the right customers with the best fit for your product. But the second piece is knowing those target accounts incredibly well. And you can't do this at scale, okay? Or at least not very easily, because what it requires is mapping out who the buyers are in that account, what their priorities are for the year, what you think their use case is, how you solve for it, how you stack up against their incumbent tech. And that kind of homework, while there are tools to make it easier, ChatGPT is one, which we can talk about, there is no way to do that without some level of homework. And so if you're starting from I'm just going to run everything at scale, I'm never going to have to collaborate with the sales team, I'm never going to have to ask them to, get engaged, you're going to have a hard time. That's not account-based marketing. It's just having an account audience that you run in your digital campaigns, which is not bad. It's just not quite ABM. So that's the foundation, right? Is for your target accounts, spending the time to know them and map them really specifically and intimately. And then I consider that tier one. I think the scalable part of ABM is where intent data can come into play. So I can't research every single account. I can't ask my sales team to do that for dozens of accounts each. The next tier to me should be based on intent, and it's helping the sales team, the SDR team, however it works in your org, prioritize how they do prospecting based on the accounts that are in the market. And there are a bunch of ways to do this, ranging from scrappy reverse IP lookup tools you can put on your website all the way to six-figure, 6 cents setups. But the point of intent is understanding what would the behaviors be of an account that would be interested in purchasing but hasn't quite reached out to us yet. And that lets you do two things, right? The first is predict who may just come and eventually ask for a demo themselves, or B, be proactive and surround those accounts with digital advertising, email outreach. At Jupiter One, where I just recently came from, we saw this several times where large whale accounts would show up as in market. The sales team would go after them with LinkedIn and email and calling and never get a reply. And a week later, that same account would ask for a demo request. Like the sort of send the troops to surround them approach does work, even if it's not direct. I send an email, you click on it, we book a demo.
Right.
The approach of seeming like you're everywhere does work for accounts that are in market. So I like that tiered approach, that you have to have a really core strategy on your target accounts and what that means, and also have use the same ABM data that you're building into your program to have scalable options as the next tier.
Okay. So do you have something like a golden number in terms of how many replicable ICP models can you build out before you say okay, look, this is the persona, this is who we're going after? And because it feels like sometimes, especially when you're liaising with sales, and it feels like I'm giving them even more stuff to do. And then, sales guys, I mean, they're gonna they get only two numbers. One is I will give you more leads, or I will give you more revenue. Those are the only things. So I mean, obviously I get that that's bait, but what is a good point at which I can be like, okay, I think we know this person now. Is it gut? What is that?
So it's a great question, and I actually have some interesting input from a recent just roundtable discussion I was on with the Cybersecurity Marketing Society, where this came up. How do I pick my ICP? How often do I cycle out target accounts? But the short answer is I don't think the work is ever done. I see ICP and intent data as, like I say with websites are never done. It's not we did a redesign, we shipped it once and it's complete.
Right.
You should constantly be improving. My bias, though, I will say, is I'm a startup marketer. This is my 5th startup. I've built my career in startups. And so obviously my bias is the ICP work is ongoing because in startups, of course, that's the case. So, maybe someone watching has a better idea of when the golden number is, but I have seen every 6 months to a year, you learn more things based on the deals that you close, that you win, that you lose, the feedback from the market, the way that your product roadmap is developing. Like the ICP will shift, and it should. Some of the best practice that was discussed in this call I mentioned was when a company changes, they update their target account list every 6 months, and then you're locked in, you chose your targets sales. That's great. We're going to run campaigns for 6 months, and then you can cycle a few out. I've heard of orgs where they cycle them out based off of just which ones are closing, close won or close lost, and then that's when they cycle, and they're otherwise very locked in. And I've worked in orgs where the target account list was putting the finger in the air, this kind of intuition. And so instead of like really having a target account list, they were mostly just working based off of intent data, period.
Right.
So I think it requires experimentation like anything. As marketers, we're used to that in digital. We're used to that when it comes to campaigns and emails and website. We're like, oh, we'll just test it. And then when it comes to ABM, I think there's this expectation from other marketers, from our sales teams, that it'll just be lightning in a bottle and we'll get it right the first time.
Yeah.
I just don't think that's realistic.
Right. No, that's I mean, that's hard to hear, but I'm sure that that's the right one, because it does. I'd love to see an end inside there, but like clearly there isn't one. But the other thing I wanted to ask you was, so you know, like how you have this protracted number of different things you want to get to know about the ICP. At some point, it starts at the point where I'm starting to dig up hobbies and influencers they follow. I feel like at this point it's just stalking. So it's giving me a lot of like very bad memories of being back in college and trying to find out everything about somebody you might potentially
like
become seriously involved with.
Yeah.
And now suddenly you know who their second aunt is. You know, it's like it's one of those things. I don't see how some of it could be relevant, though. I have had pushback about this from my team. So if you can tell me what you feel like is very useful and what, you know, areas of those, you know, people that you feel like, you know, you don't need to know their blood group, you know.
Yeah.
So
it's so funny, and it's especially funny because I don't know if you've seen Clark Barron talk about how ABM is just open source intelligence. It's the same thing, but, you know, it's a SOSINT, because it's very true. But I think that the things that matter are the things that you can tie to specific campaigns. So on the company-wide level, I like to focus in, and this is what we're getting ready to do at Endor Labs, on expected buyers, expected users, expected use case, and their programming languages. It's a very core, like everything else we learn, we find if it's an account that's in like a salesperson's Rolodex, great. But those are the core 4 things that I care about, because I'm going to run campaigns to specific people based on their use case. I'm going to run campaigns potentially based off of like programming languages used. You know, I ask for the things that I'm going to use as a marketer, which helps with a few things. First of all, I have an actual action item to take. Second, because there's a very clear output from me, a sales team is more likely to do it because they see what the work is getting them. And then the things you learn along the way can be very useful as a rep. But if you're focused on the things that actually feed into the program, it's less work, but it's also more relevant. But when it comes to individual like prospect research, I think it's a similar thing. If someone found out that I'm a musical theater buff and offered me Broadway tickets, well, I'd probably take a meeting with them, and you wouldn't know that unless you did a little bit of social.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. See, that's the thing. I mean, I didn't know until you told me like today. So.
Yeah. Well, because I know what this is like, so I stay off the internet. This is if you don't want marketers to send you gifts, if you don't want sales reps to book meetings with you.
Yeah, I'm going to be Googling your name and going to like the 3rd page of Google to find those.
But this is my point. Like, if you're getting that far in the weeds, you have to do something with it. So sure, if you see on LinkedIn that somebody donates to a very specific, interesting organization, it's not a personalization token. It's a real thing about that person you're trying to get in contact with. So for the love of God, do not put in the subject line, "Oh, I see you donate to the Humane Society of Atlanta."
Ooh, okay.
Cut a
Yeah.
check to an org that they care about. Great. So I think it's fine to learn personal details. People put them online. They're adults. They know that they're out there, hopefully.
Yeah.
So it's fine to do like prospect specific research, but then you have to empower the sales team with, here are the gifts you can send. Here's the way that we personalize, and here's the way that we don't. And if you
That's
don't,
kind of at the sweet spot before it becomes too weird, like, right in there.
hey, if you're like getting into their third level connections, probably don't mention it. But if it's publicly on their LinkedIn page, I'll give you an example. Endor Labs, obviously, we have lots of fun with the Star Wars adjacent stuff. But actually, not too long ago, there was one prospect in an account plan that one of the Jupiter One SDRs pulled up, that he was like, I know this is the guy. I know this is the decision maker. I've heard from 2 other people at this account. They say, this is the guy. I just can't get the one I need to talk to me. You pull up his LinkedIn page, and what is his cover photo on LinkedIn? Well, it's the inside of it's the inside of Rise of the Resistance at Galaxy's Edge with the stormtroopers. You're like, oh, this guy.
Oh.
This guy. So I told this SDR, I was like, look, if this is the guy and we are confident that we can sell into this account, send him something cool. Send him a lightsaber for all I care. But this guy is signaling very publicly what he's into. Yeah, that's an okay personalization signal. If you are having to dig super deep,
maybe just not go there. Yeah. I get what you're saying. All right. Okay. So I can remove the second half of the spreadsheet. I get that. I think somebody should give me a medal for you having said ChatGPT, like 10 minutes ago, and I haven't said a single word yet. And you know how I'm such a junkie for like AI in anything marketing. It's so exciting to me. So now, please, can I know how you use ChatGPT in your ABM intent, your process?
Yeah. Okay. So this did not come from me. Full credit to Kurt Vizette, who runs go-to-market like operations over at Jupiter One. So that go-to-market org like still follows the MEDIC sort of value pyramid methodology, right? So the idea of mapping out an account, what that account cares about, their use cases, how we solve for them, all of those things is like very core to that particular organization. And the nice thing about that being just part of the org is it translates very nicely into account plans and ABM. And so one of the things that Kurt started doing that now I've taken on and I find to be super useful is using ChatGPT to comb through the data on an account. It works best on publicly traded accounts where you have investor statements or lots of press releases or like public documentation. But finding a 80-page PDF investor statement, you can upload that to ChatGPT and just plug in the prompts for all of the value.
Okay.
And so, it's a little bit better than like, Control F keyword search, because they may not use the specific term that you're thinking of describing your use case as, but they might have a section where they talk about their security concerns. In our case, if they had if they mentioned a acquisition strategy coming up in the new year, great. We could put them into the merger and acquisition case study campaign, and that worked to great effect. It's just a shortcut for consuming lots of data and like focusing on the things you care about. And like anything with AI, you have to still use your brain and read through it and think about what it's saying. But because it's just summarizing very specific sources, we found it to be like really useful, to the point where some of the SDRs would just copy paste the ChatGPT responses and put it straight into HubSpot. And I was totally happy with that.
Yeah, that sounds great. Actually, it's a very simple, straightforward use of intent right there. That's excellent. Okay. Anything that you would love to incorporate into your practices in 2024? Is that something that you just kind of found out that you really are looking forward to trying?
Yeah, so that specific workflow is one that I want to keep using. The other thing that I'm trying, so Endor Labs is a bit of a fun challenge for me because so many things are starting fresh. I have, spent a lot of time in my career fixing or optimizing an existing program. So to build it more from scratch is really exciting, including ABM. There's also a lot of appetite for it. Early conversations with our head of sales is like the first thing he mentions is, hey, when are you going to do ABM? But in the spirit of focusing more on the strategy first, the tech coming later, one of the things I'm working on is what I'm calling the intent map. So I feel pretty strongly about this when it comes to use cases or just intent signals, to understand first and foremost what would be the signals that someone is in market. If I had a crystal ball and I was a mind reader, how would I know? Okay, if I could read minds, I would know or I could read calendars. I would know because they'd be having internal meetings about it. I would know because they'd be searching for a buyer's guide. I would know because they would be asking in their private Slack channel with their peers for recommendations. Okay, I don't have a crystal ball and I can't stalk someone around the internet. So then narrowing that list down even further to the clues I do have at my disposal. Some of them require no additional tooling really beyond just some basic reverse IP lookup, like this account looked at our pricing page. Well, clearly they're far enough along to care about how much it costs. That's a signal. Or this contact looked at these 3 blog posts that are all related to the same use case. There's a signal. That doesn't require an intent model that tells me the account is in the decision stage, but it does require some more thought and some more manual account review. And it's kind of the baby steps. So that's how I'm approaching the building of a brand new program here is first just cutting all the process out and just understanding what does intent mean, what does it look like, and then what can we track. And I think that's going to serve us well for a few reasons. First of all, we're scrappy. That's the stage we're in. You've got to do things that are not going to break the bank. But second, that was my big lesson at Jupiter One, and I talked about it in one of my talks. It's great to have the shiny new tool and go, ooh, what can I do with it? But it would have been so much better if I knew ahead of time how I was going to build the program and I made the tooling work for me. So I'm starting with that lesson learned this time around.
So you hit the ground running as soon as you have the tool, right? Got it. And so on the subject of tools, was going to be my last question today was tools that you can't live without, tools that you just cannot work in your trade, in what you do. And I'm taking notes. So.
Okay. I'm going to approach it as tools I would love to still have, but truly there's nothing I can't live without. Another goal of being a startup marketer, because there are plenty of tools I would love to have that I'm just not going to get this year. But I will say things that I've worked in the past, let's go on a scale from like really scrappy all the way to.
All right.
So on the scrappy side, I really like a tool called Candy. I think it's Canddi.
Yeah, you mentioned that in the talk that I attended with you. Yeah.
Very simple technology. Okay, it's reverse IP lookup, adding in some data from your forms. So all they're trying to do is say, this is the IP address, the account based on the IP address. Now that this person has filled out a form and we can cookie them with a first party cookie, now we can say this is the person at that account. It's not foolproof, okay? It's put junk data in forms. They don't accept all of your cookies. Like there's all sorts of things that can go wrong, but it is a step in the right direction. It's very affordable and it's like simple tech that you can understand. So I used this really effectively when I was at Lineup Systems, which was a company in like the ad tech space, media space, with a team that was very scrappy because it was very simple, very easy to understand. You could add some light lead scoring to it, but just super basic, who's on my website strategy. So on the scrappy side, I really like Candy. all the way up to when I think about like big ABM platforms, to me, the decision between 6sense and Demandbase came down to like internal negotiation. But the main difference as I see it is 6sense is going to kind of be a black box in terms of this is the model, it's based on your data, trust us. And they do give some good data on how the model's working, and that's nice. And I think that that's useful. And we did see a significant uplift of if 6sense says the account is in market, it is genuinely more likely to become an open opportunity. That's great. Whereas Demandbase is much more you are hands-on in the criteria for account scoring. You can set the filters, and there's pros and cons to that, because the pro is you feel like you own it. The con is you introduce whatever bias you have, whatever potentially bad process you have into that. So that's the core difference as I see it. They're both otherwise pretty much doing the same things.
Oh, that's fantastic.
But I do think that they're both useful platforms. They do the same core things on the marketing side. It's just your philosophy around account scoring, predictive models, and how much you want to be involved. Because I've felt very much like, oh, I want to see it and tweak it and whatever. But I also became convinced pretty early on of how that can go awry very quickly, because you think you understand your ICP, or you just can't process the level of data and context that an AI model like the one that 6sense uses can just do at scale to then make predictions. You just have the ability to do that as a human.
Yeah.
So that's the scale, all the way from Candy to full ABM platform. In between, I really like, I mean, this is not specific tools, but some tactics. Gifting, if people are in an office, branded cookies work great. I know it's like so simple and it sounds like not that exciting or sexy, but I'm telling you, sending cookies with our logo on them was more effective than any of the fancy.
You're kidding me, really?
Yeah, people love it. We used to do this at Lineup for like account go lives and for ABM. And there's something about this showed up for everybody, and it's buzzing around. And I think a lot of times marketers feel like, well, I can't, how do I know it's getting to the security team at that org and not just the whole office? Or how do I know that the CISO I really want to see it has seen it? And I say, you're missing the point. If you buy a billboard space, it's not about who individually, it's about the collective feeling that everyone in the office was like, where did that come from? So
that wonderfully intangible brand recognition thing that,
if you haven't gotten comfortable with some things not being able to be tracked, ABX is hard for you.
Marketing in general, I think, gets very hard if you have to quantify every single thing. Yeah, but I do realize that it's like 50% of most marketers' jobs is just qualifying leads, qualifying work. But yeah, I get that. All right, I think I have a lot to think of. Actually, I didn't understand the subtle differences that until you mentioned it, specifically with introducing bias with one tool to the other. I never quite got that. That was really nice. Thank you. It was insightful.
Yeah, it's also why all scoring, I don't know where the quote comes from. I'm going to forget, but it's like all models are wrong. Some are useful. Account has all the same problems as lead scoring. Let's just be honest. Like, it is exactly the same thing, just at a account level. So I think that doesn't mean we don't use it. I just think you have to be cautious, because I'm sure you've encountered this. I'm sure everyone who's done ABM in their career has encountered this, where you say, this is what a qualified account looks like, and the sales team, but they're not converting. And you have to go back to the drawing board. Yeah,
of course. I mean, that's like 50% of the job. That's understandable. You have to take some of the wins and take some of the losses. It happens.
If you're more transparent about them, that's what fosters trust ultimately.
Absolutely. I get that. I mean, I think this is the closest to liaisoning with sales, that especially with like larger organizations, mine isn't, but like thankfully, the sales head and I have like dinner every week, so it's a little nicer. But still, I mean, I'm sure the larger the team, the harder these issues become, and the more again, I've heard of a lot of tug of wars, and I mean, the ABM team seems to be the one that is closest to sales and closest to understanding the ICP. And I cannot for the life of me understand how they are not part of the overall strategy, because it feels so much like nobody understands the customer better than the ABM team, right? Like, I was just seeing like there's so much of an argument now for like a chief of strategy being an actual thing with every company. So yeah,
Yeah.
let's see how things evolve. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Yes, thanks for having me. This was fun.
I
It's
can't
been
believe it was 30 minutes. It just flew by.
I know.
Thank you.
Okay. See ya.
Bye.